This is the Plein Air Podcast with Rhoads, publisher and founder of Plein Air Magazine. In the Plein Air Podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called plein air, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it plein air. Others say plein air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Rhoads.
Well, thank you, Jim Kipping, and welcome to the Plein Air Podcast. I'm really excited, and I'm excited because the weather has really warmed up here in Austin, Texas. It was cold just too long this winter, unseasonably cold. And tomorrow, the great master artist Albert Handel is coming over to my place. I've got some property here. I've got a lot of gnarly looking, beautiful old twisty oak trees, and he wants to paint my trees. So we're going to be painting together. He and Linda, maybe, who knows, maybe some other people will come by, and we're just going to plein air paint together for the day, which is going to be really fun. So I'm excited about that. You know, Albert's been painting for 60 years. He is considered one of the top pastel masters, top oil master. And every time I'm with him, you know, I was over at his studio just the other day, and he's showing me some tips and some techniques. So when I'm out painting, I'm sure he's going to be giving me some advice. He won't do it unless I ask for it, but I will be asking for it. So I'm all ready. I got my hat on, I'm ready to go, but I'll take it off out of respect to our guests for today. I'll be posting some photos of my painting excursion with Albert, and you can follow me on Facebook or Instagram. It's at Eric Rhoads, and Rhoads has no E in it. It's Rhoads, no E. Okay. And follow me on Instagram or Facebook if you would. That'd be kind of nice. I'm always posting stuff there. We are thrilled about the Plein Air Podcast and about Plein Air Movement and the Plein Air Movement, the Plein Air Magazine. Plein Air Magazine, now the number one selling, and has been now for a few years, number one selling art magazine nationally at Barnes & Noble. Barnes & Noble, we're pretty cool about that. Secondly, Michael's stores. We are now in, I think, 139 or something Michael's stores. If it's not in your Michael's store, make sure to ask for it. This podcast has now had over 1.5 million downloads, and you're thinking, why so many for something that nobody even knows what the word is, plein air? Well, obviously this movement is spreading, and there's a lot of people very interested, so we're pretty excited about that. And we're also honored that the Plein Air Podcast has been rated number one in FeedSpot's 2021 top 15 painting podcast list. And you can subscribe to this. There's a subscribe button wherever you're listening, on your phone or wherever you know, it's on all the different mediums, and you can get it there. Oh, okay. So as always on this podcast, we always end it with a marketing minute where I'm giving marketing advice. Speaking of marketing, I started all of this marketing stuff when I was trying to build the Plein Air convention. And what happened essentially is first one was in Las Vegas, and I was just like trying to get people to come, and nobody was signing up. I had, about half of what I needed. So I'm brainstorming, and I thought, well, artists need to know about marketing. I've spent my life in marketing. I know a lot about it. And so I thought, well, I'll do an art marketing boot camp in the morning. Well, that did it. All of a sudden it sold out, and every year it sells out. And every morning at Plein Air Convention, I do art marketing boot camp for an hour, sometimes a little longer, but essentially I've trained people on how to market and sell their artwork. Plein Air Convention is coming up in May, and it's important to get your ticket. It's a gathering of plein air artists, the world's largest gathering of plein air artists in person. It's even larger with our online events, but that's separate. And essentially we have about 60 to 80 instructors. It's right now we've got 60. We're waiting to find out if we need more, because we may have to reduce the size of attendance this year based on COVID protocols. We're waiting to find out. That's why you need to get your seat now. Get it while you know you can get a seat. And also, I was told to mention that hotel is almost entirely sold out, and you need to get that. We have a special link on our website. Actually, after you register, you get this special link because we don't want people registering for hotel rooms and then not using them and canceling at the last minute because we have to pay for them anyway. So anyway, get registered for the Plein Air Convention. Just go to pleinairconvention.com. I should also mention, I love to paint and I love to paint with friends. And it all started, way, way back. I was at the Carmel Painters Festival, or I don't remember what they called it, Plein Air Festival at the time, I guess. And I was sitting around with some artists, and it was a rare moment in a bar, and we were all kind of eating French fries and drinking beers. And all of a sudden, somebody said, look around, we never get to do this. We go to these plein air events and we never get to spend time together. It's very rare. Usually there's an artist reception, but we don't paint together because we're trying to come up with different locations and different scenes so that we can, compete and sell our paintings. So I said, well, what if I were to put everybody together and we do something where it's just us? There's no competition, there's no show. And everybody's like, yeah, I'm in. So I quickly put something together at a bed and breakfast. I took over the whole place. It only had 17 rooms. I took every room. And I had some really incredible painters, some of which, actually all of which now are legends. And some were not well known at the time. Some were still legends at the time. And so we did this week together and we painted together, we cooked together, we had a lot of fun. So everybody's, after seeing and hearing about that, they're like, I want to go to this. And I realized I couldn't make it an invitational anymore. So I took over a facility in the Adirondacks where I could have a large number of people. And I love the Adirondacks and it's just spectacularly beautiful. So I have this, I think this will be my 11th 12th, 11th, I think, Publishers Invitational. I was able to do it last year. I wasn't able to do it the year before. That's why I've lost track of the count. But essentially, it's a week of painting. You roll out of bed, we feed you, we eat together, we paint together all day in lots of different places, usually 2 places a day. We sit up at night, we sing, we paint portraits, we play music, we just chat with one another, and it's really a wonderful experience. Anyway, that thing's going to be sold out soon too, because everybody's like, I'm getting out, I'm ready to get out. So you want to get out and get there too. So come to the Paint Adirondacks experience. It's just go to paintadirondacks.com. That's the best thing to do. All right, now we'll get to our guest, Douglas Fryer. Now, I had the pleasure of meeting Douglas. I had not met him before, I don't think, and we asked him to come in here and shoot an instructional video because he's so popular. He's winning so many awards. He was just named as one of the new members of the Plein Air Painters of America group, which is very prestigious. And so he came here. He stayed in on my property in the world famous artist cabin, and was in town for a week. So we got to do a little bit of time together, not as much as I would have liked because there were some things going on in my family. But anyway, I got to know him and I thought, you need to know him. He's a fabulous painter. You can learn a lot from him. Please welcome Douglas Fryer. Douglas, are you there? There you are.
Hi, it's great to see you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here on the Plein Air Podcast. We are very excited about this. I should say Douglas was born in 1963. He's just a young child compared to me. He was born in Salt Lake City, raised in the northern suburbs of Chicago, and later in California. He's an artist regarded for his richly textured, subtly abstracted landscapes, just beautiful, and still lifes and figures. And he uses a variety of tools and techniques and mediums, and he creates these unbelievably poetic works that inspire contemplation and reflection. He received his BFA in 1988 and an MFA in 1995 from Brigham Young University, which has a fabulous art program and a fabulous illustration program. And he's taught at BYU, University of Hartford, Fashion Institute of Technology, and Snow College. And he took his first painting lesson at 9 years old, but realized he wanted to be an artist many, many years earlier. So Doug, what a story.
Yeah. It's been a long old career if you start at 5 years old. So,
Well, when did you sell your first painting?
oh, it probably was early on, but it was probably only for pennies. So I don't.
Yeah, well, pennies were worth something to you at that age, so
Yeah, but
that's
I think I had a friend in high school that commissioned me to do a drawing or something. That was probably my first commission.
So were you one of these people, we hear about this, I think it's controversial a little bit, but there's people who just excel at drawing or painting when they're little. Uh, were you one of those people, or was that something that you just drew all the time and you got good at it? What's the story there?
I probably like a lot of kids, I just liked to draw. I don't know how good I was, but people told me I was good, but that was probably just them being nice. But what it ended up being for me was encouragement and validation. And so, drawing ended up being just part of my identity, I guess.
Yeah.
I just knew that that was part of my life and it was going to be a part of my life. And I knew very, very early on. I was 5 years old in kindergarten when oh, there I am. Look at that.
Yeah, the people who are
That's
the
me
people who
at
are listening this on audio are not seeing the pictures, but
oh, that's right.
yeah,
I
you're just
was
cute as a button.
I was 5 years so I was 5 years old in kindergarten, and I don't know what kind of assignment we had, but we all had crayons and that and just a lot of paper on the table, and we were all gathered around this big table together, and all of a sudden I sensed my teacher standing behind me, and she was watching what I was doing, uh, and thankfully, she was very perceptive, and she told the class, you need to stand up and come and see what Doug is doing here. And I was drawing some dinosaurs, and I knew all the names and I knew all the kinds of dinosaurs, and I was just drawing a big dinosaur on each of these pieces of paper, and I still have those today. I they were part. Anyway, it was that day I decided I was going to be an artist, and
Well,
I've
that's
never looked
fabulous.
back.
So, do you remember or do you recall the first time you actually saw a real life painting, uh, and maybe a painting that inspired you? I can remember the moment very clearly. I'll just tell you so you
Yeah,
have time to think about it. But essentially, what happened is we went on vacation in New York City, and I went to a museum, and there was this giant painting of pirates, swashbucklers, right, fighting in a ship. And I remember that, and it was kind of like, wow, that's a painting. And I thought it was very emotional. What do you
yeah.
remember?
Well, my uncle was an artist, and he had some health problems that where he had to kind of give up doing creative work, and he was more of a technical illustrator. He but my dad was also an art major for a short time in college, so I grew up with having a lot of art books in our house, and we had little bits and pieces of art from friends of my parents. I remember several watercolors that friends had given my parents, and they were these two friends were architects, and so they dabbled in watercolor and were actually quite good. Those were the very first original paintings I remember seeing, and I remember being really captivated by them. Um, but it was probably not until I was in, I was probably in elementary school, and my parents decided to give me oil painting lessons.
Oh,
And
that's pretty
so,
progressive. Oil painting lessons in elementary school.
well, I was 9 years old, and my teacher was Mrs. French, was her name, and she taught oil painting in her house and in her backyard. And I remember the very first day I went to class, um, I had my little sort of little toolbox full of my brand new materials and brushes, and I think I had a little stretched canvas, and she told me, Doug, why don't you just wait a minute? I'm going to get the other students started, and then I want to talk to you. And then when she was finished and she came up to me, she said, come with me. And we went into the far back of her backyard. And she said, I want you to look into the sky. And I want you to tell me, I want you to tell me what you see. And I looked up and I said, well, there's clouds and it's blue. And she said, oh, no. She said, now I want to, she said, that's not right. She said, look at those trees over there. Tell me what you see. And I said, well, it says there's a trunk and there's branches and there's leaves. She said, no, that's not it. And then she went on to explain to me about movement and about air and about the substance of that air, and that everything was everything was this patchwork of shapes. And she gave me my first introduction to seeing the world in artistic terms rather than in terms of subject, of things.
Right.
So it was very important.
Well, that's a great lesson to learn from the beginning. It only took me about 15 years to learn that one. And only because, I don't know, I went to somebody's workshop and they said, focus on big shapes. And I'm like, what? And the minute I started doing that, it changed everything.
Yeah.
And so she was very smart, that Mrs.
Yeah.
French.
It's it's your first introduction to abstraction, and when you were told, look at big shapes, they were saying simplify it, abstract it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's all of that matters now. It's really huge. And do you recall a first museum visit and what really leaped out at you, or what the experience was like?
I do. I think my very first real museum visit was on a field trip. I think it was that year in college that we went to New York as a group of students. So I remember going to the Met. I remember going to the Frick and Museum of Modern Art, and I was just blown away. There's just no description for the feelings of seeing so many great works of art, originals, and all of the things I'd seen in books. It was
Well,
amazing.
this is the thing that's really disturbing to me right now, and I'm sure I'm going to make somebody mad by this, but we have grown accustomed to seeing art in images on our phones, on Instagram, on Facebook, and that's great. I mean, these are wonderful tools and so on, but to see the difference in person, to see the texture and the buildup of paint and the thick brush strokes, the things that you oftentimes cannot see when you're looking at it, on a picture on Instagram. And the museums are struggling. They're like, how do we get these young people who are digital natives? Everything's about the phones. How do they get these people to get to the museums? And I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that once people, if they were to look up an image, look up a local museum, look at an image on their phone and tell themselves, I want to go see that in person, just so I know how it differs. Once they do that, I think that, that click happens in their head and they go, all right, I need to do more of this.
Well, so many people, and it's not just young people either. It's people convince themselves that that an image functions the same way in a reproduction as it does as an original, but just as a photograph of Eric Rhoads it's not you. It's just it's a suggestion of what you look like, but it's not you. It doesn't carry your spirit. The original carries a certain spirit. It has a certain soul to it that can only be felt in its fullness, standing in front of it with your nose up to it. There's just no other way.
So there are painters who have become your inspiration. I know, based on some of the things we talked about when we were together before, but talk to me about some of your inspirations and why they really connected with your soul.
Well, probably the very first, the very first idea I had about art was my parents had this Van Gogh print just framed and above our sofa, and I used to just as a little child, I used to get up and just pore over that and just be amazed, even though it was just a reproduction, amazed at the texture and the colors and the lines and the patterns and the rhythms, and I was just captivated. I loved that print. But later, I would pore through all of the books that my dad had. We had these big books on Rembrandt and Van Gogh we had on Vermeer, and who else? We had that whole Time Life series. Of artists. So I would just, even though I couldn't read, I would just flip through the pages. I remember specifically looking at Rembrandt's self-portrait in our big Rembrandt book, that portrait that's in the Scottish National Gallery. And a couple of years ago, and see that painting in it, in the original, and it just brought back this flood of memories of sitting on the floor looking at that book. But I would say that the very first artist that I really was influenced by was Andrew Wyeth.
Yeah. And
probably more than anything, his winter paintings, and they just have this starkness, this graphic quality, this feeling of reality that and he it's not that they felt cold and they were real because of that. They were real because of their warmth, their actual the spirit of the land he was painting that he loved so much,
and the mood. Well, and certainly when you see what Wyeth did to realize the medium that he used, just I mean, to pull off what he pulled off with watercolor, just amazing.
It's phenomenal, and you mentioned mood, and he actually said that about his work, that it wasn't so much like this faithful rendering of the place, but his work was more about the mood.
Yeah.
But I would say that Andrew Wyeth was a really big influence on me. His landscapes, his interiors were just amazing. His figures, everything about it just struck a chord in me.
One thing that I think is interesting, though, is that, Wyeth was a pretty tight painter, and yet you've become very abstracted. Who influenced your sense of abstract painting?
Well, you know, he was tight when he wanted to be tight, and he was abstract when he wanted to be abstract.
Good point.
It wasn't just, I mean, he had all the facets, but as far as abstraction of reality, I would say that Whistler was a really big influence on me, especially his paintings of the of water and the ocean. Degas was a wonderful abstract artist as well, but I would say that Degas in college was probably my biggest influence as far as the abstraction of the form or of the subject into form. So I think I probably emulated Degas as much as anybody in his drawing and in his breakup of space.
Mm-hmm.
The painting of the laundress. I think it's in the Met. That is just I think one of the most beautiful paintings in the world. It just contains the whole universe in that painting to me.
So, yeah, so I want to kind of move to the next level on this. You had some painters who kind of influenced your whole plein air thing that also combined into the abstract that were kind of from the 1920s and 1930s. Who specifically influenced that for you?
Well, I would say Sargent would have to be the biggest influence on plein air work. The ability that he had to distill a scene to pattern Broadway, but to be able to suggest the complexity of nature and rely on the movement of materials as he was translating from his observation. I think certainly he had to have been the biggest influence on me as well as thousands of others. The work that he did in both the figure and environments just can't be equaled.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would say that if I were out plein air painting and I was trying to find inspiration from someone in the past, it would be Sargent.
I understand that you really liked Carlson as well. Is that right?
Carlson was wonderful. I was first introduced to his still lifes, but there was a painting, the Misty Sea, that's in the collection of Brigham Young University. And when I was a graduate student, I used to go into that collection and just just kind of camp out in front of this painting. It's just, I think, one of his very best. It's just mesmerizing, and it's the simplicity of the forms and the infinite variety that he suggests within each shape. This single wave that is coming towards us.
Well, and you can see that he really painted air. He knew
Yeah.
how to paint air. When you
He painted.
look at misty sea, you can see the humidity in that air and the distance into the clouds. Pretty amazing.
It's a wonderful painting, but all of his landscapes have a very mystical quality to them. They're derived from very aware observation, but they are all again distilled to this compositional pattern that becomes sort of a frame of mind rather than a rendering of a place.
Right.
They become just magical and symbolic.
Now, I will tell you quickly, I was in Vermont last year. I live in the Adirondacks in the summer, and I went over to Vermont to meet with Julie McGowan, who is going to drive me around and show me some facilities so that I could look at possible places to hold future events, because we do a lot of events. And she's telling me about all the artists who painted so and so painted this field, and it's a famous painting, and so on, because there were a lot of artists around the Jeffersonville area in Vermont. And she said, and just down that road, Emil Carlson's daughter lives down there. And I'm driving like 60 miles an hour, and I screeched on the brakes. And I said, I backed up the car and I turned, and she said, well, it's after 5 o'clock. She's closed, but she has a little gallery with some of her dad's work in it. So we pulled into the driveway. We knocked on the door. She very generously came out. She opened up the gallery. We got a chance to see, Emil's work, but also his father's work. And she had about 10 or 12 paintings left over that were for sale. And most of them had really, really big price tags on them. And there was one that there were two actually that I was especially drawn to. Both of them were eucalyptus trees, and it painted in Florida. And I couldn't stop staring at them. And I'd look at other things and I'd go back and I'd stare at it anyway. I ended up buying one of them. And so now I have a Carlson in my home, which is pretty cool.
I wish I had seen it when I was there.
Well, it's not that home. It's in the other home.
Oh, it's in the other home. Of course. Yeah. Sure.
But you can come and see it anytime. And
thank you.
Yeah. And for those of you who are thinking about breaking in and stealing it, I live on an island, and I'm not telling you where. Well, Douglas,
I'll tell you.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I was just going to say, Carlson. There's hardly an artist I've looked at more in the last 4 or 5 years as Emil Carlson. As I was thinking, I mentioned Whistler earlier. He and Whistler, although you can certainly distinguish their works. There's no mixing them up, but they had sort of a similar attitude towards the world as far as their ability to translate and abstract and come down to the essential shapes, the essential colors, and the you look at the way Whistler will organize his space in those landscapes. They're just there's a simplicity to them that that I think is the thing that captivates me. They're not trying to copy nature. They're not trying to render it faithfully. Again, very much like Wyeth, it's far more about the mood. It's far more about the emotion. That the work is based in emotion, and that the subject is only a point of departure to make a work of art that is its own living thing.
Well, I want to talk about that because, I judge lots of painting events and art competitions, including, in some cases, my own. And I see people who are outliers that are really standing out. And one of the big things right now in plein air painting and landscape painting is this idea of abstraction. But you see a lot of sameness, a sea of sameness. It's green fields and blue skies and puffy clouds and
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and Z-shaped trails going down the road. And
yeah.
and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not being critical, but
No.
you look at your work, for instance, and I look at that and I say, you're standing out there in that field and you're seeing a blue sky, but you're making it brown and you're making that whole thing tonal and you're figuring out how to make it feel abstract. How on earth do you accomplish that? What goes through your mind? Are you mentally ill or autistic or what's the story?
Well, I'll tell you. Can I give you sort of a roundabout way
Yep.
of answering that? It consists of a short story. When I was in graduate school, I was teaching part-time in another department. It was in the design department. I was teaching some illustration classes, and those classes are associated with the graphic design as well. And at that time, they brought in a speaker, a guy named Gordon Bowen, who is probably in the last 40 years, there's hardly anyone that's been more important in advertising as Gordon Bowen. He at that time, I think, was working on the American Express campaign that I think ended up being like campaign of the decade or something like that. Anyway, he was speaking to us about excellence in striving for excellence. And I remember him saying that he was currently looking for someone to take over a certain campaign, I think it was. He said he had been in the search for a year. It was a year-long search. He still hadn't found anyone. And that position paid $500,000 a year, and this was back in the early 90s. He could not find anyone to fill that position, and this is what he said. He said, "There's plenty of room at the top. All of the competition, average, the mediocre, and the followers." That brings me to the answer to your question. There are plenty of people willing to teach you rules, methods, procedures, styles, formulas. They're ready to refer you to, well, this is how Bouguereau did it, and this is how Sargent did it, and so on. And they'll say, I've got the secret formula, and they'll say, it has to do with this or that or the other that you will include in your work. And this is for traditional work. This is for academic work. This is for avant-garde. Even they'll say they'll reference other art movements and but the the thing is, as human beings, we want to know the end from the beginning. And the unknown is scary to us. So, following a formula that guarantees success, well, that sounds better to me than trying to fumble my way through something on my own. The danger is that this emulation, deriving your work from a certain formula, it's an affectation. It doesn't ring true. It's adequate, but it isn't great. The meaning of the work it's embodied in the work itself. You as an artist, you can't lie. Your work immediately allows others to discover who you are and what you believe and what your values are, even if they're average. And so what we have to do is be brave enough to do the fumbling through, to chase that very elusive ghost of an idea that's in the back of our heads. And as we do that, we discover, or we search for, we find the tools, the materials, the method that best serves us to chase after that elusive idea, that elusive feeling and emotion. It's only by doing that we come up with our own our own manner. We define ourselves, and our style reveals itself. Our style is nothing more than habits that we create. We habitually make marks like this. We habitually gravitate towards these certain aesthetic sensibilities in others' work. We define ourselves with every move we make, every choice we make. So I think that, what makes my work stand out, I'm not sure if it does or not. I think a few of my paintings stand out. The vast majority are evidence of my struggle to get there. But a few that have stood out, I think there's an authenticity to them. There's a certain mystery to them that I can't quite put my finger on, but it's this combination of beauty, symbol, organization within sometimes very organic environments, I guess. There's this sense of saying this thing, although it's mundane, carries meaning, it carries importance, there's a significance to it that and it's my way of saying it existed. It's gone now, but it existed in a moment of time, as do I.
As you know, I produce a lot of videos that teach people important things that other people discovered. I think that, you and I talked when we were on the set doing an interview there, that I studied under a fellow who was one of the great photography masters at the time. And he said that, I was complaining that we were we were not out shooting photographs. And he said, well, you need to learn the technology first so that once you get the idea in your head, you know how to implement it. So I don't know. I mean, I was talking to Kevin McPherson the other day, and he was kind of uh, opposed to that idea, the idea that, you just need to kind of find your way and figure it out on your own. So I think there's a lot of different approaches to that.
There are, and by no means do I mean that we shouldn't gather all the information we can, have as many tools in our toolbox as we can. We definitely should. I mean, I've got 3 huge bookshelves here full of art books and on artists and how to, and all of that. The instructional videos are a wonderful tool for us to have, because seeing something done, we're visual people. We see something done and some light bulb goes off and we say, oh, that's how that's done. That serves me to learn how to do that, because it takes me in the direction of this, to chase this elusive idea. It's when we think, if I learn how to draw accurately, when I learn to draw accurately, I will be an artist. When I can reproduce that photograph to look like that photograph, then I'll be an artist. If I can simply learn the rules of perspective, well, artists do that. I'll be an artist. Those are all parts and pieces of what we do, but it doesn't give content to the work.
Well, they're technical proficiencies.
Exactly.
But
And
they
we
don't
need
necessarily make you an artist. I mean, being an artist is more than, some of my instructors always said, your job is not to create a photograph. It's already been done. Your job is to try and figure out how to expand on what it is that, that you're seeing and inspiring.
Yes, expand on it, distill it, but absolutely, of course, I've spent 40 years drawing. I've spent my whole life drawing, but as a professional for 40 years, I have tried to perfect my skills to draw anything I want. Now, and then I'm allowed to, I can give myself permission to go in any direction I choose, whatever I'm inspired to do.
All right, I'm going to go back to a question I asked earlier, and that question is that, all right, you're standing out there in the field, you're out in Utah, you're looking at a snow-capped mountain, a field in front of you with a road, and you have a bright blue sky, and yet you manage to tonalize that and to abstract that. And is there a planning process that goes through your head? Do you try and envision the painting before you paint it? That's a struggle for me, and I've tried to do it. Some people who are great tonalists, they can do it, but it's something about, well, I see a blue sky, but I'm going to put in a yellow sky. It just is. I find it to be a little hard on my brain. How do you do it?
Well, one of the very first things I ask myself when I'm looking at that scene is how would the ordinary person, compose this picture? Well, and if I can picture that, then I try to do something different. And so I may crop the picture off so I don't show any sky. I may abstract the forms down to just a simple rhythm or pattern, may instead of the blue sky, I'll gray it, or I'll or instead of those greens, I'll make it brown or something, or I'll instead of painting blades of grass, I'll just make it this soft velvety transition from shape to shape to shape. I'll simplify my values. I think about a grid that I could apply all of the information to organize my shapes, and then I'll organize my values. I'll say, here are my light values, here are my mid values, here are my dark values, and then I'll prepare a palette that has several colors that are in the light, several in the medium, several in the dark, so that when I go to paint, it's already simplified into more of a graphic, symbolic representation of the scene.
Well, it's just it's just beautiful. Your work. I don't mean to fawn over you, but it really is special and it's beautiful. And um, I'm looking forward to seeing more. And when I saw your work in person, I'd seen it online, but when I saw it in person, much like we discussed before, there's this soulful quality, this paint quality that the rhythms that you just can't feel them when you're looking at a photograph. So that's pretty cool.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah.
So, I want to just mention or just ask about a couple other things. You just became a member of the Plein Air Painters of America group. Tell me about that. What's that all about?
Well, I don't know. It's kind of a surprise to me. I was nominated, and the votes came in to accept me, and it was offered to me, and of course, I was really honored to accept membership. So I think what it entails is that I get to go painting with a lot of plein air painters who are a lot better than me. I can learn something
Well,
and have
that's the fun of all of this. You get to hang out with people and learn something.
I really look forward to it. It should be really enjoyable getting to know artists that I've admired for so many years.
Well, it's a great group of people, and I was very lucky to have encountered them very early on in my walk into this whole plein air thing, and they really started the U.S. movement. I've just helped expand it,
Yeah.
but they really need the credit for doing what they've done. And I think Kevin McPherson was the first president of that club,
Oh, really?
and
Yeah.
so anyway, that's an honor and congratulations on that.
Yeah. I'm
You
excited.
have now a lot of people are going to listen to this 5 years down the road, so I apologize to you, but you have a big solo show coming up. Tell us about that.
Yeah. I'm working on a show that will be in um, uh, June of this coming summer.
June
Um,
24th through 30th is what the
yeah.
slide says. Yeah.
Yeah. June 24th to the 30th. And I'm hoping to get it all done in time.
Yeah.
So
There is that.
yeah, but I've got that plus a number of paintings for other locations and some commissions. So it's a busy time.
Well, what a great thing to have as a problem, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Well, Doug, I just want to say that you're a great inspiration. I think there's a lot of people listening to this who are going to get a tremendous part out of it because you really are addressing things that don't get talked about enough, and talking about the soulfulness and the spirit of the work and the sense of yourself being translated into the work. So I want to congratulate you and also
yeah.
thank you for the inspiration. I should mention that Doug's website is, let me look at it here. It's, oh, here it is, douglasfryer.blogspot.com or Douglas Fryer Art on Instagram, douglas.fryer.5 on Facebook. Who are the other four?
I have no idea. I didn't even know I had that number.
Yeah, well, we did a little investigating. So, well, thank you so much for being on the Plein Air Podcast. It's a pleasure to get to know you and to see what you're able to do with paint, and it gives us all something to strive for.
Well, thank you, Eric. I sure appreciate you inviting me to do this. And it was just really enjoyable doing the instructional video. And it's a great work that you're doing in helping people to move along the path, just solving problems and inspiring them to make art, just to make more art.
Thank you.
I had an instructor. His motto, he would tell all of us, more art faster.
More art faster. There's a fellow by the name of Heine Hartwig, who lives in the high Sierras of California, and everybody I ran into says, you got to go take a lesson with Heine Hartwig. And so I saved up the money, and I called him and I said, how much for a lesson? And he said $10,000. And I said, well, I like, how many lessons is that? He said, every week, once a week for so many weeks. And I said, I've got a job. I can't do that. I got triplets at home that are babies. And I said, how much for just one day, just one 8-hour lesson on a Saturday? I don't remember what the price was, but it's like $600 or $700. And so I drove for 3 hours to go to this lesson, got up at 5 o'clock in the morning and went and took a lesson with this guy. And I learned a lot from him. But the thing that was really interesting is on his desk or easel area, he had 3 canvases set up, all 3 different sizes. He had a photograph in front of each one, all different subject matters. And he would paint on all 3. Once he'd dip into his yellow ochre, he's painting on this one, then he goes over to the other one and he figures out where he's going to put his yellow ochre, then he goes on to the next one. And I said, why on earth do you do that? He said, if you don't learn to paint fast, you can't make any money as an artist. Well, Douglas, this has been absolutely fabulous. Thank you again for being on the Plein Air Podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
All right, great. Take care. All right. So we have had a terrific interview with Douglas. Now it's time for the Art Marketing Minute.
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
In the Marketing Minute, I try to answer your art marketing questions, and you can upload a video question at artmarketing.com/questions. It's all set up. All you got to do is hit the little video or audio recorder and then it sends to us, or you can email them to me, eric@artmarketing.com. I get a lot by email. And Amadine, who is producer of this show, is going to tell us what the first question is.
So the first question from Bart Charlo is, my question is for the artist just starting or considering selling their work. The art pricing formulas on so many posts seem constantly boring and constraints based on size, time, etc. I realize they are not geared towards the luxury market that you speak of, and most of us wish to enter. How would you determine your entry prices under those circumstances?
All right. Well, thank you, Amadine. Amadine's just moved to America from France, and you're doing a great job. So thank you for that. Bart, like all things, how you start matters. I went out and I started learning golf on my own, and I developed a lot of really bad golfing habits. And then I decided I need to get some lessons. And the guy that was teaching me said, we have to undo all the bad stuff that you learned. And one of the things that happens is that as artists, we make up our mind at some particular point that we're going to go from being a hobbyist into being a professional, whether it's a part-time or a full-time professional. We are moving into a different area. And we don't know where to start. We have no idea where to begin. And it's all very confusing. And so we just start. and we start doing things and we make a lot of mistakes, and hopefully we learn from those mistakes. But if I were coaching somebody from the very beginning, I would do things a lot differently than the way a lot of people do things, because you see things that you think matter. Now, let me give you an example of that. If you're deciding that you're going to advertise, all of a sudden you start paying attention to advertisements, right? I can't tell you, and I know you all know this, how many hundreds of thousands of ads came out after the Got Milk campaign that said, got real estate or got bologna or got fish or, whatever it is. And we didn't know the original purpose of that campaign. We didn't know how they were trying to target people or what they were trying to do. All we know is that there was a campaign we thought was cool. So everybody copied and replicated it, and it did not have the same effect, right? And the reason it didn't have the same effect is that you didn't have a strategy in mind. And as an artist, you need to have a strategy before you do anything else. And so how do you learn a strategy? Well, there's a lot of resources out there. There's a lot of people who teach. I teach at the Plein Air Convention Art Marketing Boot Camp, new every year. I have a book out, Make More Money Selling Your Art. There's a lot of things like that, but you want to start out with the goal in mind, right? Where do I begin? So you've got to start out with, where do I want to be? Now, if you're not making any money today, and then you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to go from 0 to $10 million in sales in 1 year, you might be being unrealistic, right? So you have to figure out, how do I judge that? Because really everything takes a lot longer than you think it's going to take. Takes a lot of progress, a lot of steps. And so you want to kind of be in an experimental stage. This is why in one of my videos, I talk about, if you're a person who is going from, let's say you're a heart surgeon. I use that example because the heart surgeon came up to me at the Plein Air Convention. He said, I'm going to retire in 5 years, stop doing heart surgery, and start doing painting full time. And he said, so how do I get there? And I said, well, the worst thing you can do is stop doing heart surgery one day and go from having your income of however many, I don't even know what heart surgeons make. Well, let's say it's $1 million a year. Suddenly you're going to go from making $1 million a year to making no money. Are you going to be comfortable with that? And he said, well, I'd like to make a little money. I said, well, then you need to develop a transition plan. So you've got a 5-year or 3-year period of time. You need to start getting your feet wet in learning about marketing your art, producing your art, having the discipline of putting it out a certain amount every time, having the discipline of selling some and moving forward, so that maybe you start doing less surgery and you start doing more art, and they eventually cross. And if you're making $1 million a year as a heart surgeon, you might not make $1 million a year as a painter right away. Although I know a lot of painters that make more than $1 million or $5 million a year because they've become so popular. Now, I'm going to address your luxury question because that's a different thing. And you talk about pricing is boring and constrained. I think that's an interesting statement. I wish I had you on the call with me so we could talk about that. But pricing is something we talk about last. First, we talk about luxury market. Now, you mentioned luxury market, and I want to applaud you for having the observation. A luxury market is the people who buy Louis Vuitton or who stay in the Ritz-Carlton, and pay big money every night for a hotel room. And there's an entire science to the luxury marketing world. And there's even a luxury marketing association, which has meetings in New York. And I'd be a member if I lived in New York, but I did have dinner or lunch with the founder of the luxury marketing association. And I learned a lot about it. The one most important basic principle about luxury marketing is that rich people behave differently. They want the best, and they're not price sensitive. These are people who want the best. Now, most of us can't relate to that. I mean, I'm sorry, but I don't have the money to buy a Bentley, right? It'd be really cool if I had the money to buy a Bentley and to buy a jet. But, there are people out there that I know that I've met that used to be friends with me or still are that have those trappings, and they don't think twice about it. I have a friend who would not think twice about walking into an art gallery, pointing at 10 paintings and saying, I'll take them all. And the guy would say, well, don't you want to know how much they are? And he'd say, I'm sure they're fine, right? Because he's got so much money, it doesn't matter. So, but you have to, you don't, cost does not equate to luxury value. So let me make this point, and I've made this point in my seminars. A Bentley, I don't know how much a Bentley costs today because I've never looked, but they used to be about $250,000. I'm sure they're a lot more today. But the cost of making a Bentley, which is made by BMW, is only $18,000 higher than the top of the line $100,000 BMW, or maybe $120,000 BMW. So, they do a little extra better paint job with extra coating. They do really, really beautiful interior wood. Maybe they put an extra special sound system in, but they're not selling that car for $18,000 or $20,000 more than the BMW. They're selling it for $150,000 more. Bentley is all about perception. People don't buy luxury cars just because they're great cars, which most of them are. They buy them because they want to be seen in them. They reinforce their self-identity, and it sends a message to other people. How many of us turn our heads when we see somebody driving down the road in a Rolls Royce? It's like, or a limousine or something. It's like, who's in there? We want to know. And some people want to live that way and like that. So I think that you have to think about how a luxury person thinks. I went to a collector's house. It was I had lunch with him in a sprawling estate at the top of Beverly Hills, and I drive through the gates, and there are like 9 garages, and they're all open, and there's cars pointing out in each one of them, and every luxury car from Lamborghini to Rolls Royce to Bentley to, he had a lot of different things. And then we go in the house, and we have our lunch, and then he says, okay, I want to show you my art collection. We walked around, and he shows me the art collection. He tells me the name of the artist, and he says, I paid $1 million for that one. Now, I'm not criticizing that. I don't know that I would do that, because that's just, I'm more interested in the art than I am the what would be the status of the art, but not everybody is. So you need to think in terms of status. So if you're trying to become a high status artist, you have to be thinking in terms of, what do I do to be high status? And the Luxury Marketing Association can tell you all these things, but it's about packaging, it's about elegance, it's about the right colors, usually black and gold. And it's about branding yourself as the most important thing out there and the best of the best. And that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of money. You might have to phase into that. And then you've got to figure out, how do I reach the wealthy people? Well, magazines like My Fine Art Connoisseur, we have all these billionaires who read it that buy lots of art. So, a lot of people sell art in it. But the mistake is that you can't sell a Mercedes in a flea market. And what I mean by that is, you can't sell high-end expensive art in a low-end inexpensive gallery, or in a place that doesn't send the right environmental message. So you've got to get to the right place. And, the biggest, most prestigious gallery in America is Gagosian in Los Angeles or Hollywood. And, he makes stars. Most of them are not representational painters. Most of them are modern painters, which doesn't matter. And he makes them famous, and he makes them rich, and he gets rich. And that's, how we get to the whole thing. And so you want to make sure that you're focusing on building yourself a luxury brand and getting to the point where you are a luxury brand yourself. I mean, that's how it's done. And then when you get to pricing, just remember one thing. I was talking to Douglas Fryer when he was in town recently, artist Douglas Fryer, and he said, I had a collector one time tell me that my work wasn't expensive enough. I have another guy who told me he was at an art show and he had a painting, and the lady said, how much is it? And he said, it's $40. $4,000. And she said, okay, and I'll take it. And she writes him a check for $40,000. And he said, ma'am, you put an extra zero. And she said, no, I intended 40,000. And she said, but it's 4,000. It must not be worth it. And she ripped up the check and walked away. See, we don't think like them because we're not in the same position, but there are people out there that have no problem writing a $40,000 check. So it's about courage. It's also about, how you present things. So we had an artist who entered our plein air salon and won a category. And he had this painting and he was getting ready for a gallery show. And his wife said, don't sell that painting. And he said, oh, but I really would like to sell it. And she said, no, I really love it. So they made a deal. He said, I'll tell you what, I'll put a high price on it. All the other paintings in the show about the same size were $900. He said, I'll put a high price on it. If it sells, then we'll just go ahead and sell it. She said, okay, I agree to that. So he put a $5,000 price on it, put that Plein Air Salon winning certificate right next to it. It was the first painting to sell at full price. So anyway, those are the kind of pricing discussions that you need to think about. All right, so that's the question for today. Thank you for tuning in to the Art Marketing Minute.
This has been the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads. You can learn more at artmarketing.com.
All right, I want everybody to remember that we're going to be going to the Plein Air Convention in May. We hope you'll sign up, and we've got marketing there. Just go to pleinairconvention.com. Also, we have painting in the Adirondacks. I hope you'll join me for that this spring. It's a retreat. We're going to have a lot of fun, and it's going to sell out fast because COVID's kind of over, and a lot of people are going to come that couldn't come before. So just go to paintadirondacks.com. I want to encourage you, if you've not seen my blog, it's called Sunday Coffee. I do it every Sunday. It's kind of more like philosophy on life. It has little to do with art, but once in a while I talk about art. It's called Sunday Coffee. You can find it at coffeewitheric.com. I'm also on the air daily, 5 days a week on Facebook Live and on YouTube. It's called Art School Live, and you can find it. Best place to go is to YouTube. Subscribe there. Just search Streamline Art. That's our company, and then you can find it. Also, if you don't mind, please follow me on Instagram and Facebook. That would be great. And also make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Well, anyway, I'm Eric Rhoads, publisher of Fine Art Connoisseur and Plein Air Magazine, and we are going to have a ball painting this weekend. I hope you get out and do the same thing. So remember, it's a big world. Go out and paint it.
This has been the Plein Air Podcast with Plein Air Magazine's Eric Rhoads. You can help spread the word about plein air painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 plein air painting tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.